What's going on, everyone? Dreamer Boy here with another video, and today we're going to be talking about the advantages and disadvantages of work from home in 2022, and I am going to show you a little bit about my setup, how I try to keep a healthy work-play balance, and try to make the best out of an interesting time in the world and a huge transition period for most companies work from home. Let's talk about advantages first, because why not start off with the good, and then we can dive into what the not so great reality is sometimes. Advantages. Time is the biggest advantage from work from home, and there is no argument about it. You may be asking yourself, what do you mean by time, right? Well, let's start off with 1A, being commute. The fact that you don't have to drive to work and then drive back home, we're talking about saving anywhere from an hour to 3 hours typically for most workers. And people will be like, 3 hours seems like a lot, but you got to really think, right? Most people don't live right next to the office. They live a half hour, 45 minutes away. That's pretty typical, right? So at that point right there, in ideal circumstances, we're talking about an hour to an hour and a half shaved off of your day. But don't you guys remember what it was like to drive in traffic? Early in the morning, driving to work in traffic. That half-hour commute turns into 45 minutes to an hour. That's not fun. It's just not. And then the drive home, it always seemed like traffic was worse, which you're just going, how is this even possible? But it was. So that's what I mean by time for at least the first part of it. The second part is it allows you to have more freedom once work is done, because that commute is cut, right? And also allows you to spend more time at home taking care of certain adult responsibilities. You're sitting down working. Who says you can't just get up for 2 minutes, throw a load of laundry in, hit go, right? Instead of all your laundry being done on the weekend, where it's like, oh, I gotta catch up again. Well, now you can throw in, loads throughout the week and be good to go. Same thing when it comes to preparing dinner and getting dinner ready. You wake up, you're in a hurry, you're in a rush, and you forget to take out what you were gonna have for dinner. And now you get home and you're going, oh, I just drove an hour and a half home. I don't want to cook now because I don't even have anything prepared. So there's greater flexibility in being able to cook, being able to get the normal everyday house things set. That is something that I've noticed being an advantage from working from home. I have an overall cleaner workspace. I have an overall cleaner living space. And the time aspect is massive. It's absolutely massive. When I'm done with work, I can just go straight to the gym. All I have to do is go to my room, change clothes, and go to the gym, right? Another advantage, productivity. And this is something that I think is skewed a little bit, and I'll explain why. I think if you've been with a company for a year and a half, 2 years prior to the pandemic, or even 6 months prior to the pandemic, you love this work from home because you already had your proper training, you already had your experiences, you got your feet wet, so to speak, and got your wheels underneath you to go, and that's awesome. So anyone who has been at a company for 6 months to a year prior to the pandemic is probably thriving when it comes to productivity. And that's most of workforces in general for businesses. It's not like, well, hopefully their turnover rate isn't, 30, 40% a year. Like, that's not ideal. But those people, I feel like, are thriving because they know how to do their job. And now they're just getting to do it from the comfort of their own home, right? So that means maybe more family time. That might mean more time with their pets, which, I guess you can throw into family time, but it allows them to spend the time they need at work to get everything done and then go from there, right? So that's a huge advantage. But I think it's skewed because for anyone who switched companies, training has definitely gotten harder. Having to look at a screen when someone shares it, right? And trying to learn that way isn't always the easiest. Trying to set up times with meetings and stuff is a little bit harder. Having to wait on someone to respond to, Slack or Teams versus being able to just get up, walk over to someone's desk and talk to them and take care of a quick question. I think it's forced a lot of people to waste a lot of time trying to figure it out themselves instead of just going over and asking someone, because asking someone would take 2 seconds. But I feel like there's this weird thing where you don't want to bother people, even though we're all there doing the same thing. We're all there, being a team and getting things done. But yeah, I think those are really the main advantages from work from home. But I feel like we've spent a good amount of time on the advantages. Now let's talk about the disadvantages. So disadvantage number 1, your workspace is your living space. Unless you're fortunate enough to have a separate office, then this does not apply to you. And I'll dive into it a little bit. Your living space is your workspace. For most of us, that is the case. Whether it's working out of a bedroom, working out of a dining room, working out of a living room, whatever the case may be, there isn't a separate space to really work from, which means that you may not be inclined to turn on your webcam because you may be embarrassed of what's behind you, right? Like, that is a thing. It's also your personal space. Do you really want everyone at your job to see your living space? Not really. Like, that's why offices are there, right? That's why people have separate offices inside their home. It's so that that is separate from their personal living space. And that is something that companies just haven't caught up with. And that's not their fault and their responsibility to a certain extent. I don't think companies should just pay more because we want an office. I think companies have a responsibility to provide good working conditions to keep productivity and morale high. That's where I think they have a responsibility. And I think it is their responsibility to a certain extent to have social interactions between teams. Because at the end of the day, we are all numbers when it comes to businesses. We all have an employee number. We're all just a number. And we all know that, but sometimes it's nice to pretend that we're not. And that we're more than just a number. So having that social aspect at work is severely lacking for most companies. Because, again, everyone doesn't have their webcam on. Why? Well, they're in their living space. They don't want to show their living space. Personally, I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. Again, I have a pretty neutral, space. I got a couch behind me. I have little nesting tables, coffee table, lamp, artwork. That's it, right? And a rug. I don't really have much going on, and I keep it relatively clean because turning on my webcam forces me to keep it clean. So that's a major disadvantage, is not having that separate space. But a bigger issue is when the workday is done and you close your laptop lid and you walk away from the desk that you've been sitting at for 8 hours a day. And I go and sit on that couch back there and I glance over to the left. Well, there's work again, right? And yes, the laptop is closed, but that doesn't mean that you're not one button away from seeing work again. It's hard to deal with that. You just want to leave. Like, that was one of the great things about being in the office, is when the workday was done and you got to leave the office, there was a sense of relief. There was a breath of fresh air that you were going to a new environment. And unfortunately, that just doesn't exist anymore because we are working from home. Most people, when the workday is done, they leave their house because they've been here all day. You're just constantly here. That isn't fun. It's just not, and it's not a conducive environment for long-term success without burnout. I don't know what the answer is. If I did, I'd be really rich. So if anyone had the perfect solution to work-home life balance, hybrid scheduling, whatever the case may be, that made sense for businesses, made sense for employees, they'd be making a ton of money. I don't have the solution. Hopefully someone does at some point, right? I think that's probably the biggest disadvantage, though, is just the lack of separation between working home. Another disadvantage is depending on your living situation affects your day-to-day, right? Like, I don't have a dining room table. Why? Because it has to be my office. It's supposed to be my dining room. It's not. Some people are lucky enough to have a eat-in kitchen or have a really nice bar top where they can put stools and eat there. I don't have that. My apartment isn't set up that way, and I can't blame a company for that. I can't even really blame the apartment complex for that. Unfortunately, with the whole work from home thing, that caused another major issue, at least in the Tampa area, and that is the amount of people that moved to Tampa. Over 100,000 people moved to Tampa in 2021. What do you think happened to the housing market because of that? Supply got smaller, demand got higher. Higher cost of living by a lot. What is the answer, right? Companies can't just pay an extra 20%. I mean, they might be able to, but they're not going to because they'd be dumb to do it. But there has to be a middle ground, because either there needs to be better rent control or housing control in the Tampa area. Companies either need to understand, hey, the cost of living is this. Maybe we do have to pay more, because you got to understand, depending on where you live, companies pay different amounts of money to get talent in that area, right? Well, realistically, if cost of living goes up, that means that people coming to the area and people in the area need to get paid more, which means that now talent has cost more. So there has to be this little like balancing act, and I think it involves companies. I think it involves potential rent control. I think it comes down to actual companies in the area doing the right thing and not charging 30% more just because they can. There should be an ethical and moral standpoint behind it. But I think that's enough of the disadvantages, because again, this isn't a pity party, but let's jump into what my setup is, how I have it set, and why I have it set this way. Here's my office mode. The light switches behind me to a more neutral light color. And my workflow is literally, I grab my actual productivity mouse. I am using an MX Master 3, which is pretty nice. Side scrolling. I love this mouse. This is not something the company provided me. Well worth it in my book. I think people should spend money on peripherals that they really enjoy. You gotta think you're always using them. I'm able to use my keyboard, right? Which is nothing more than just a simple Logitech mechanical keyboard. But I really like the feel of a mechanical keyboard, and the fact that I get to use something that it does click a little bit loud, but because I'm not in an office, it doesn't really matter, right? Like, I don't have to worry about that because I don't have work people around me. And that's about it, right? Like, I keep it very simple, very clean. And then when it comes to play, well, I try to switch it up a little bit, and we'll switch the lighting to, red or blue. I'm able to switch the ambiance, so I can actually kind of trick my mind a little bit and my brain from one mindset to another of like, hey, this isn't work anymore. This is now something to enjoy and something to play. And then let's kind of just go into the rest of my setup. That is my setup. It is all very simple. It is very clean. I try to keep it as neutral as possible because I don't want to look at it and be like, oh, I could be playing games, or, ooh, it's work time. I try to keep it neutral so that whatever task I have in front of me, I'm able to go do. But I think that's it. I think this video is long enough, and I do have to cut some bits because 22 minutes is way too long. But yeah, it's been your boy, Dreamer Boy. I hope you enjoyed this video. Without further ado, don't stop believing, don't stop dreaming, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace.